me not see it.
I was just trying to get home with a bag of groceries that was digging a deep, red line into my palm. You know that specific kind of exhaustion after a double shift where your brain feels like it's floating in lukewarm water? That was me. When I saw the out-of-order sign taped over the elevator doors with that peeling blue painter's tape, I didn't even have the energy to be angry. I just sighed, adjusted the strap of my bag, and pushed open the heavy fire door to the stairwell. My apartment is on the 4th floor. It's a workout, but nothing I hadn't done before. The stairwell has that specific smell, stale cigarettes, industrial floor cleaner, and that faint, metallic tang of old dust. The lighting is that flickering, sickly yellow fluorescent hum that makes your skin look gray. I started climbing, my sneakers thudding rhythmically against the concrete. I passed the landing for the 2nd floor. A few seconds later, I passed the landing for the 3rd. I was breathing a little harder by then, feeling the strain in my calves, and I pushed through the next door expecting to see the hallway leading to my unit. But when I looked at the plastic sign screwed into the cinder block wall, it didn't say 4. It said 3. I stopped for a second, just staring at it. I figured my brain was just on autopilot and I'd miscounted. It happens when you're tired. You zone out for a flight and think you've gone further than you have. I shook it off, took a breath, and headed up the next flight of stairs. I counted the steps this time. 16 steps. I turned the corner of the landing and looked at the wall. Floor 3. A cold prickle started at the base of my neck and worked its way down my spine. I looked down the center of the stairwell, that narrow gap between the railings. It looked normal, just a series of identical concrete rectangles receding into the shadows below. I told myself to stop being a coward. Maybe the building manager had messed up the signs. Maybe someone was playing a prank. I decided to just keep going until I hit the roof, then I'd know exactly where I was. I ran up the next flight, then the one after that. I didn't stop to look at the signs until I had climbed 4 more levels. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I stopped, gasping for air, and looked at the wall. The number 3 stared back at me, the plastic slightly cracked at the corner. It was the exact same sign. Not a duplicate, the same one. I knew because there was a tiny, dread splash of coffee on the bottom edge of the frame that I had noticed 2 floors ago. That was when the panic really set in. It wasn't a slow realization, it was a sudden, violent shove into a reality that didn't make sense. I turned around and started sprinting down. I didn't just walk, I threw myself down those stairs, my hands sliding roughly over the cold metal railing. I must have gone down 10, maybe 15 flights. I was moving so fast I nearly tripped and broke my neck a dozen times. Every single landing I passed had that same number. 3. 3. 3. I stopped and leaned over the railing, shouting for help. My voice echoed up and down the shaft, sounding thin and brittle. There was no response, just the relentless, buzzing drone of the fluorescent lights. I looked down into the center of the spiral. It didn't end. Usually, you can see the ground floor, the dirty mat, the bottom of the pit. But this was just a dark, infinite throat of concrete and shadows. It felt like the building had stretched out into something impossible. I sat down on the landing, my back against the cold cinder block. I needed to think. I reached into my bag and pulled out a bottle of water, my hands trembling so much I almost dropped it. I stayed there for a long time, just trying to convince myself I was having a stroke or a very vivid nightmare. Then I heard it. From somewhere far above me, there was the sound of a door slamming. Then, the unmistakable rhythm of someone running. It was a frantic, desperate sound, the sound of someone who was absolutely terrified. As the footsteps got closer, I heard a voice. It was raw, hoarse from screaming, but the pitch was undeniably mine. "Help! Is anyone there? Please!" The voice sounded exactly like I did an hour ago. I froze, my blood turning to slush in my veins. I watched the gap between the stairs, expecting to see myself come sprinting around the corner. But the footsteps just kept going, circling down and down, fading into the depths below me. It was like a recording on a loop, a ghost of my own panic playing back in real time. I've been sitting here for 2 days now. I know it's been 2 days because my phone battery finally died a few hours ago, and the last time I checked the clock, it had been 48 hours since I entered this hell. The hunger isn't even the worst part anymore, it's the thirst. My throat feels like it's been lined with sandpaper, and every time I swallow, it feels like I'm gulping down shards of glass. The smell is getting worse, too. It's not just the dust anymore. It's a thick, cloying sweetness that sticks to the back of your throat. It reminds me of the time a stray cat died under my porch back home, that wet, rotting, oppressive stench of meat left out in the sun. It's coming from somewhere below, rising up the stairwell in slow, invisible waves. I'm not alone here anymore. About 6 hours ago, I heard the footsteps again. But they weren't running this time. They were slow, limping. I heard the sound of something wet dragging against the concrete, a rhythmic, tacky slap slide, slap slide. It was coming from above. I peeked through the railings, looking up. A few floors higher, I saw a hand grip the railing. It didn't look like a hand anymore. The skin was peeled back in long, jagged strips, revealing the dark, glistening muscle beneath. The fingernails were gone, leaving behind raw, weeping sores. It looked like someone had spent hours clawing at the concrete walls until there was nothing left of their fingers. I realized then that the version of me from yesterday was catching up. And she wasn't in good shape. The me from a few hours ago is still running laps around this place, screaming her head off. I can hear her passing by every 20 minutes or so. But the other one, the one that's falling apart, she's moving slower. She's quiet. Every time she passes a landing, I hear her breath, a wet, rattling sound like a chest full of fluid. I try to move, to go further down, to escape her, but my legs are like lead. There's this profound, crushing weight in my chest that makes it hard to even stand up. It's not just exhaustion, it's like the air itself has become thick and viscous, pinning me to the floor. I'm just sitting here in the yellow light, watching the shadows stretch and warp on the walls. The smell is unbearable now. It's the smell of an open wound that's gone bad, something deep and visceral that makes your stomach flip. I can hear the slap slide of her foot getting closer. She's only 2 flights up now. I can see the shadow of her legs through the gap in the stairs. They're dark, stained with something that isn't water, dripping slowly onto the landing below. I'm staring at the door to the 3rd floor right in front of me. I know if I open it, it won't be my hallway. It'll just be more stairs, or a void, or something worse. I'm just waiting now. I'm waiting for that version of myself, the one with the ruined hands and the rattling breath, to finally round the corner and look me in the eye. I wonder if she'll recognize me. I wonder if she'll be angry that I'm still sitting here, or if she'll just be glad the cycle is almost over. I can hear her now, just a few steps away. The sound of her dragging her mangled body across the concrete is the only thing filling the silence. I'm going to close my eyes now. I don't want to see what I'm about to become. I just hope that when the next version of me comes running past, she doesn't trip over what's left of us.
Next story.
I used to love my birthday. It's that one day where everything is supposed to be about you, right? You get the presents, the cake, and that feeling that you're the center of the universe for 24 hours. But looking back, I realized that being the center of the universe is a terrifying place to be. It means everything revolves around you, and if something goes wrong, you're the one stuck in the middle of the wreckage. I was turning 7. I remember the house smelled like vanilla frosting and those cheap, waxy streamers you get at the dollar store. My mom had gone all out. She was wearing this floral dress that she only brought out for special occasions, and her hair was pinned back neatly. She looked so happy. Everyone was there, my cousins, my grandparents, a few kids from down the street. It was the perfect afternoon. When it came time for the cake, they dimmed the lights. The only thing glowing in the room were those 7 little flickering flames on top of the chocolate frosting. My mom started the song, and everyone joined in. You know the rhythm, that slow, dragging melody of happy birthday that sounds more like a dirge if you listen too closely. I was caught up in the moment. I felt this surge of pure, unadulterated joy. Before I took the breath to blow them out, I made a wish. I wished to stay this happy forever. I closed my eyes, felt the warmth of the candles on my face, and pushed the air out of my lungs. The room went black. I expected the lights to flick back on and for my dad to start cutting the cake, but instead, there was this weird, momentary lapse in reality. When the lights finally did come up, everything looked identical. My mom was standing there with the match in her hand, leaning over the cake. The candles were lit again. The cake was smooth and untouched. I looked at her, confused, thinking maybe the first set of candles were those trick ones that relight themselves. I laughed, a little nervous, and she started the song again. Happy birthday to you. The voices were exactly the same. The same pitch, the same slight off-key note from my Uncle Jim. I blew them out again. Dark. Lights. Song. At first, I thought it was a prank. My family was big on practical jokes. I figured they had a box of cakes hidden in the kitchen and were just cycling them out to mess with me. By the 10th time, the novelty wore off. By the 20th time, I started to feel a profound sense of unease. The air in the room was getting dense. It wasn't just the smoke from the blown-out wicks. It was like the oxygen was being replaced by something thicker, something that made it hard to swallow. By the 50th time, the atmosphere changed from celebratory to strained. I looked at my mom. Her smile was still there, but it looked plastered on. Her cheeks were beginning to droop, just a little. The skin around her eyes was puckering. When she sang, her voice sounded thin, like she'd been screaming for hours and was losing her vocal cords. Happy birthday to you. The guests weren't moving from their spots. They were standing in a semicircle, their bodies rigid. My cousin Leo, who was only 5, was staring at me with wide, glassy eyes. A single tear had tracked through the grime on his face, but he didn't wipe it away. He just kept clapping his small, sticky hands in perfect synchronization with the beat. Time didn't exist anymore, at least not the way we know it. There was only the song and the candles. I tried to run for the door around the 100th reset. I made it to the hallway, but as soon as the candles were blown out, which they always were, because some invisible force seemed to draw the breath out of me, I would find myself back in the chair. The chair felt like it was becoming part of me. The wood was cold and unyielding against my spine. By the 500th time, the horror had fully set in. The room was no longer a living room, it was a tomb filled with the living dead. The guest's skin had started to rot away in the heat of the candles. It didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, agonizing process of decay. I watched the skin on my mother's hands peel back like wet parchment, revealing the yellowed bone beneath. Her floral dress was stained with the fluids leaking from her pores, a mixture of sweat and something much more foul. The smell was the worst part. It didn't just smell like old blood, it smelled like a butcher shop that had lost its refrigeration in the middle of a heat wave. It was the scent of iron and stagnant water and raw, decomposing meat. It filled my nose and coated the back of my throat until I wanted to gag, but I had to keep singing. I had to keep blowing. Their voices were no longer human. They were raspy, dry scrapings of sound. Their vocal cords must have been shredded, but the wish didn't care. The wish demanded the performance. My grandmother's jaw had partially unhinged, hanging at an awkward angle, but she still managed to clatter out the syllables. Every time the lights came back on, they were worse. Their eyes were receding into their skulls, leaving behind dark, weeping pits. Party hats were perched precariously on bald, leathery scalps or bare bone. I looked at my mother's face, or what was left of it. Her ghost white eyes were fixed on mine. They weren't happy anymore. They were filled with a pleading, agonizing desperation. She didn't want to sing. She didn't want to light the candles. I could see her fingers trembling as she struck the match, her movements jerky and robotic. She was a prisoner in her own corpse, forced to celebrate my birth over and over again until the end of time. The cake was the only thing that stayed fresh. That perfect, mocking chocolate cake with the white vanilla frosting. It sat there, a vibrant contrast to the gray, crumbling world around it. I grew to hate that cake. I wanted to smash it, to throw it against the wall, but my arms wouldn't move. I was locked in the ritual. I don't know how many years have passed. Or maybe it's only been a few hours in the real world. Does the real world even still exist? I've lost count of the repetitions. Thousands? Tens of thousands? The guests are nothing more than skeletons held together by bits of dried ligament and the sheer force of my selfish wish. Their party hats are yellowed and torn, and the streamers hanging from the ceiling have turned into brittle, gray ribbons that look like cobwebs. The song is just a series of rhythmic clicks and wheezes now. Every time this cycle starts over, I pray for a different outcome. I pray that the match won't light, or that I'll finally die of old age. But I don't age. I'm still 7. I'm still wearing my birthday shirt, though it's now soaked through with the discharge of the decaying bodies surrounding me. The fabric is stiff and crusty against my skin. I can see my mother's hand shaking as she reaches for the last candle. There is no flesh left on her fingers, just bone. She looks at me, and I see a flicker of consciousness in those sunken pits. She's begging me. She's silently screaming for me to stop, to not blow them out, to let the darkness stay. But I can't. The moment the song ends, a pressure builds up in my chest. It's an unbearable, crushing force that overrides my will. It forces my mouth open. It forces the air out. I am a slave to my own happiness. I wanted it to last forever, and the universe, or whatever cruel thing was listening, decided to take me literally. The candles are flickering now. The song is winding down. I can hear the click-clack of their teeth as they finish the final line. My mother is leaning in, the heat of the flames reflecting off her bare skull. I feel the air gathering in my lungs. It feels like lead, dragging me down into the next loop. I really wish I had never made that wish. I take the breath. I see the tears of blood leaking from my mother's empty sockets. I blow. The room goes dark. And then I hear the scratch of a match.
Next story.
I stopped looking at my watch a long time ago. Time doesn't really mean anything when the sun is stuck at that specific, sickly orange tilt of 5:30 p.m., casting shadows that are just a little too sharp to be natural. I'm telling you this because I need someone to know that I'm still here, even if here is just a 3-block radius of a neighborhood that doesn't exist anymore. It started out like any other walk with my golden retriever, Buster. We were just doing our usual afternoon loop around the block. Everything was normal. The neighbor's sprinkler was clicking, the air had that crisp, late autumn bite, and the pavement felt solid under my boots. I passed the green mailbox at the corner of Miller Street, the one with the dent in the side where a teen hit it with a bat years ago. I remember seeing a blue jay land on it. I took 10 more steps, rounded the corner by the oak tree, and suddenly, I was standing back at my front door. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured I had just zoned out. You know how it is when you're walking and your mind wanders, and suddenly you're at your destination without remembering the trip? I laughed it off, whistled for Buster, and started again. But when I reached that same green mailbox, the blue jay landed on it again. Exactly the same way. It tilted its head, looked at me with a black, glassy eye, and took flight. 10 steps later, I was back at my front door. The fourth time it happened, the panic started to set in. It wasn't a dizzy feeling or a glitch in my vision. It was a seamless, instantaneous snap. 1 second I'm walking past the mailbox, and the next, my hand is reaching for my own front door handle. I tried to stop. I tried to turn around. But as soon as I reached that specific coordinates near the mailbox, the world just reset. By the 10th loop, something broke. I reached the corner, but Buster wasn't pulling on the leash anymore. I looked down, and the leash was just hanging limp in my hand. Buster was gone. In his place, where the green mailbox should have been, there was something that made my stomach turn. It looked like a flickering neon sign, but it wasn't made of glass or gas. It was a string of glowing, white characters floating in the empty air. Error, scene_redundancy_check_failed. I stared at it, and the more I looked, the more the world around me started to peel away. The oak tree behind the mailbox didn't have bark anymore. It looked like a photograph that had been stretched too thin, revealing a gray, empty void underneath. The grass wasn't blades of green, it was a flat, untextured green plane that felt like cold plastic under my feet. Then, I saw the man. He stepped out from behind the glitch tree. He was wearing a high-visibility orange vest, the kind construction workers wear, and he held a silver clipboard. But he wasn't a man. When he turned his head, his face didn't move like a human face. His skin looked like a grainy, low-quality video of skin. There were no pores, no sweat, no fine lines, just a blurred, brownish texture that didn't quite line up with his jawline. His eyes were just two dark, static-filled holes. He looked down at his clipboard, tapped a pen against the metal, and let out a long, weary sigh. It was the sound of a tired office worker who just wanted to go home after a double shift. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you," he said. His voice didn't come from his mouth. It just existed in the air around me, vibrating in my chest. "We're having a hell of a time deleting your consciousness. You've got some kind of, I don't know, a deep-seated recursive backup? It's stubborn. We've tried 3 different purge sequences, but your brain just keeps latching onto this specific memory of a dog walk." I couldn't breathe. My lungs felt like they were filled with dry sand. I tried to scream, but my throat felt like it was made of cardboard. "Where is my dog?" I managed to choke out. The man in the vest looked bored. He gestured vaguely toward the ground near my feet. "The dog?" "Oh, we had to downscale his assets to save on processing power while we wait for the wipe. Don't worry about him. He doesn't feel anything. Just try to enjoy the loop. It's better than the alternative." I looked down. Buster wasn't a golden retriever anymore. He was a jagged, vibrating cluster of sharp, yellow triangles. He was still making a whimpering sound, but it was metallic and distorted, like a corrupted audio file being played through a broken speaker. The triangles shifted and clipped through each other, red fluid, if you could even call it that, leaking from the sharp edges where his face should have been. It wasn't blood. It was a thick, dark crimson sludge that didn't have that metallic iron scent you'd expect. Instead, it smelled like ozone and burnt plastic, a stinging, chemical stench that made my eyes water. "What do you mean, the alternative?" I asked, my voice trembling. The man checked his watch. His wrist was just a blur of gray pixels. "The drive is supposed to wipe entirely. Complete cessation. But until the hardware catches up with the command, you're stuck in this buffer. It shouldn't take long. A few billion cycles, maybe? From your perspective, it'll feel like, well, a while." He stepped back behind the tree, and as he did, his entire body flattened into a two-dimensional image before vanishing into the gray void. I turned and ran. I ran back toward my house, but as soon as I hit the front door, I was back at the mailbox. I tried to run the other way, toward the park, but the snap happened sooner. I was back at the door. Snap. The mailbox. Snap. The door. I've passed that green mailbox a million times now. I stopped counting after the first few months, or what felt like months. The sun never moves. The blue jay keeps landing. The dent in the mailbox is the only thing that looks real anymore. Every time I pass it, I look at Buster, or the thing that used to be him. The triangles are becoming fewer and fewer. Yesterday, if you can call it yesterday, he lost his legs. Now he's just a single, vibrating yellow shard that floats a few inches off the plastic-textured ground, emitting a constant, high-pitched digital scream that never ends. The world is decaying further with every loop. The houses across the street have lost their windows, now they're just flat, gray cubes. The sky is turning a dull, flickering white, like a monitor that's about to burn out. I can feel my own hands getting blurry. When I hold them up to my face, I can see through the skin. I can see the bones, but they aren't bones. They're just white lines of text, flickering too fast for me to read. I think the drive is taking a lot longer to wipe than that man thought. Or maybe, and this is the thought that keeps me screaming in this silent, orange afternoon, maybe this is the wipe. Maybe the deletion isn't a sudden darkness, but a slow, agonizing erosion of everything you ever were, piece by piece, pixel by pixel, until there's nothing left but the memory of a walk that never ends. I'm reaching the mailbox again. The blue jay is landing. Its black eyes fixed on me. It knows. It's been here for every loop, and it's the only thing that hasn't lost its resolution. I think it's watching me die. 10 more steps. My hand reaches for the door. Snap. I'm back at the mailbox. The air smells like burnt wires. The dog shard is screaming. And I am still here.
Next story. Next story is yours. Take a look at the shadow in the corner of your room. Are you sure it was that shape a minute ago? Subscribe or be the next in line.